The first thing is, front page, pensions of 1 million Scots are guaranteed by the UK welfare system. Sounds impressive, but you know something? Social protection in the UK is 42% of the budget. In Scotland, it's only 38% of the budget. And I'm going to throw a lot of percentages at you in the next few minutes. That's a huge difference. It makes pensions so much more affordable in Scotland. And if you've read the newspapers where the announcement's been made by John Swinney that Scottish pensions are going to be triple locked, they're going to be guaranteed after independence, and they're going to be subject to a minimum 2.5% increase every year. And that's a huge benefit to our pensioners, and it gives them some security over and above what the UK system is offering, which is simply a rise more or less in line with the rise in earnings, which isn't much at the moment. But, you know, there's some funny statements in here. It says Scots are represented by over 270 embassies as part of the UK. The majority of the UK's embassies are actually through either the Canadian or the Swiss embassies. They're not necessarily direct buildings on the ground, so that's a little bit odd. It says that the Scots save billions on the cost of mortgages due to the UK's AAA credit rating. I seem to remember reading that went south quite a few months ago, but they're still dishing it out. And a rather odd one here, the UK has the world's second biggest aid budget, delivered by life-saving Scots in East Kilbride. I don't even know what that means. It's just nonsense. 800,000 Scots live and work in England and Wales without the need for papers or passports. What does that mean? We're all going to have a tartan curtain across the border and checkpoints and passports. We're all supposed to be members of the EU. We've got a social union. And again, Scottish banks were bailed out at 470 billion from UK taxpayers. Not true. The UK government put in £66 billion. The rest was guarantees. And if we're talking about bailouts, the Americans were one of the biggest bailing out UK banks. $500 billion in the United States alone went to bail out the American banking industry, which was run by the Brits. So I think they're a wee bit out there. And they say 1 in 5 workers in Scotland are employed by English, Welsh and Northern Irish firms. So what? You know? I mean, this is not good, I'm pleased to say. But let me get back to what I hope to talk to you about, which is a little bit the facts and figures. Jean said that we'd be the 8th richest country in the world. Well, we'd be the 6th richest country by GDP in the 34 richest countries. We'd be the 6th richest of the 34 richest countries, which is phenomenal. I mean, they say we're too poor, and they tell us that the oil and gas that we find is a real problem that we can't handle. We're the only country to find oil and gas that it seems to trouble them in this way. I'm sure we can get past that in some way. I'm often asked about currency and, you know, why we're staying with sterling. And there are 3 options for us in currency. One is we go in the euro, which obviously at the moment isn't such a good idea. Doesn't mean to say in 10, 20 years' time, if it's not in the interests of the country, that might not be a way forward, but at the moment not. We could float our own currency. We could have a Scottish pound. The difficulty with the Scottish pound is, with our resources, it might become too strong, and we're a small country. Therefore, if we have a small country with a limited supply of currency, other investors would try and bid into it, and sort of get a bit technical, it would become expensive and would give us a difficulty in exporting. We need to be with a weaker currency, which will help our export trade. But there's another reason as well. The United Kingdom has a trade deficit of £36 billion every year. We have 40 billion in foreign currency coming in every year to Scotland. If England did not have that 40 billion, they would be 76 billion in the red on their trade deficit, and that would not suit anybody. We cannot afford a currency crisis in a country so important to us, next to us. So, these things are all reciprocal, and we all have to work together to ensure we get the best results in these. One of the concerns I have is the possibility of the UK referendum for leaving the EU. And I'm really worried about this, because the UK leaving the EU would be a disaster for Scotland, because so many Scottish jobs, thousands of Scottish jobs, are dependent on the EU, or on trade with the EU. And a lot of the trade that is recorded as going down to England is actually being transshipped onto the EU. Scottish jobs are dependent on it. And yet the UK is now hazarding everything on a 2017 referendum, years down the line, creating uncertainty for the next 4 years. Now, I don't think personally that the UK will leave. Because very simply, it's not about politics, it's not about economics. When Joe Bloggs in Harrogate realises he's going to need a visa to go to Lanzarote, I think that would be the decisive factor. It's on simple things like that items move around. But we are actually very strong in our economy. Very simple figures. We have 8.4% of the population. We raise 9.9% of the tax, and we spend 9.3%. Now that 0.6% is an awful lot of money, when you look at the national budget. And it makes a heck of a difference to us, and it would make us nearly £4.5 billion better off in the national finances than the rest of the UK. Now, it's not money in your pocket, unfortunately, but it's money in the national exchequer, it's money that we would be able to make use of. But we have a deficit, and we would have a deficit of 5% of GDP, excluding oil and gas. And the UK deficit is 7.9. Our finances are so much better. And for the last 30 years, we have paid in more than we have got out of the UK. And I think that is a huge, important factor. We keep getting threatened about defence jobs and the defence industry. Well, since 1997, 60% of defence jobs have been lost in Scotland anyway. There's 15,500 jobs in the defence industry. Only 300 of them are dependent on Trident. And of course, the Scottish Defence Force will need the basic class lane in any case for our conventional vessels. We give 3.3 billion to the UK, while the cost of an independent Scottish conventional force would be 2.5 billion. And that would give us an army, a military service of about 15,500, a navy of 20 to 25 vessels, and around 60 aircrafts. And that's commensurate with the size of our economy and our needs. So there's a lot of things that are in our favour. Public spending. We hear about so much money being spent on public spending in Scotland that we spend too much on our civil servants and on our council workers and so on. But public spending as a percentage of GDP is 45.5% in the UK, but it's only 42.7% in Scotland. Again, you're talking small percentages, but these matter when you're talking about national funding. It's big money. Youth unemployment in the UK is 20.6%, and in Scotland it's 16.1%. And I'm pretty sure it's because here in Scotland we've had the freedom to follow a slightly different course in terms of working to reduce youth unemployment. Unemployment itself is 7.9% in the UK and 7.3% in Scotland. And I told you I was going to give you quite a lot of figures here. I'll stop in a minute. The economic growth, UK down 0.3% in the first quarter, Scotland up 0.5%. Again, I'm saying these are small figures, but they are very significant. Now, I'm not going to rattle on with a lot more figures here because you'll never take them in. It took me ages. But it's so important that we are able to get these figures out to people so they understand them and appreciate the fact that these are Treasury figures that we're using. These are the UK government's own figures that we use against them, because they supply us with the facts, we give the facts out, and people are able to argue on that basis. The figures are here, the facts are there, we engage the head, The heart is already there, and we will win independence next year. Thank you.